2012 has been an interesting year for us. This year we have proven without doubt why and how e- enterprise architecture can be used as a scientific basis for creating, running, and maintaining an enterprise. And this helped John to make a very clear statement this year finally, is saying that enterprise architecture is not a documentation or a model creation exercise, but a scientific discipline to solve enterprise disorders. I've been lucky that I've got a lot of help and support and mentoring by John about how to use these concepts, and in particular why Zachman framework provides us as necessary ontology for defining an enterprise. And we could use this for able to address the enterprise problems very quickly. The whole process of creating and addressing enterprise disorders kind of shrink from few months to few weeks. In fact, what we have successfully done for our customer last year and this year is to show them a 30 days cycle for correcting enterprise issues, right? And we took this body of knowledge and we went across different parts of the world. And interestingly, the workshops that we had this year, where we shared these concepts and the techniques about how one can address enterprise disorders in a 30 to 45 day cycle. And it's really overwhelming to see the kind of response we got in all the locations. Everybody in trying to agree that this is the body of knowledge which is going to provide the much needed base for the ever increasing complexities which are popping up around us. And what I'm to do is share this experience of solving enterprise problems in 30 to 45 day cycle. It might sound magical, right? But it's not magic. I'm like, it's a pretty simple mathematical steps. There are numbers, there are formulas, there are smaller pieces, and we need to use all these techniques of analysis and diagnosis to be able to address the problems in hand. In this webinar series on diagnosis and corrections of enterprise disorders using Zachman framework, I'm going to share our experience of addressing enterprise problems in 30 to 45 day cycle. The experience that we have acquired by implementing these techniques successfully in several customer projects. In fact, we have tried it over several problems, and today we are experimenting over 120 such problems, and how we could create the necessary analysis models and the necessary traceability models and dependency models to be able to do the right prognosis, coming out with multiple solutions. So this is what I'm going to talk about in this 3-day, set. This is what I'm going to talk about in a 3-part webinar series. This is spread over nearly around 5 hours. And each of them is going to be around 2 hours, so 1.5 to 2 hour, and each webinar in turn will have around 6 to 7 sessions, right? So you could actually split your time into a session around 15 minutes for you to be able to go through it easily. The schedule for the 3-part webinar, as you could see in your screen right now, we're going to look at the 21st November and the 28th November, and we're looking at 7th December. Okay, so in the part one, which is expected to be a 120-minute session, I'm going to talk about what are the emerging opportunities are, what are the limitations that we have, what are the typical disorders are, what are the limitations of the existing techniques, methodologies, the framework, tools that we have in addressing these problems. I'm going to look at what are the emerging opportunities, right? I'm going to look at what are the different disorders are, what are the limitations of the current techniques, and then I'm going to start looking at the solution side, make you understand a Zachman framework for that matter, okay, what this is all about and what it does. We'll also try to understand what are the concepts of primitive model. We're going to understand what are the strategy primitive models, what are the business process primitive models, right? One other thing I'm going to look at is what are the myths that we live in, okay? And we're going to see here is very, very interestingly how these are actually dependent, such that these disorders are key to in extreme cases the closing down of the enterprises, right? In the part two, we're going to look at taken a case study, the work that we did for early last year. We're going to look at the concept of how the acquisition and merger and resulting in need for application rationalization. So we're going to look at that, and we'll also try to understand, use that as a basis for our discussion, how exactly we're going to solve these problems. Then we'll try to understand, to solve this problem, how do we use Zachman framework effectively. So one of the issues that we're going to look at is what are the cells that we require for us to address this problem. We're going to look at what are the primitives for each of the cell. So we're going to look at a sample problem here, as you could see here. Then I try to understand what are the cells which are responsible. We're trying to understand what are the primitives of those cells. How do you create composites from the primitive models? We'll take an example of 11 departments, and in particular we're going to look at the finance department, okay, and then we'll look at how do we create the composite model and traceability for solving this problem. So as you could see here, there exists a very interesting relationship between the cells and the problem definitions, and how the primitives behind the cells, right, and how do you use the primitives to create the composites, right, and how do you create these composites for different departments. And in particular we're going to take one department and show you how you could create the composite models and traceability for that, for solving the problem for application rationalization. In the part 3, we are going to look at some more problem definitions, and just to kind of validate that this is not just this technique, this approach is just not applicable for one problem, but you could utilize that for a set of problem. Interestingly, what you're going to see is that when we were actually working on a different problem altogether, but since we ended up creating, I'm going to use a word called enterprise anatomy, which could little be a difficult word for you right now, but I just want you to kind of be with me right now, and somewhere in the part 2 and the 3 of the webinar, I'm going to kind of describe that a little bit more in detail. So what we're going to do is that in the part 3, we're going to look at a little more advanced stuff. We'll take some more problems, like take example like a disaster recovery plan, and how the idea of having primitives are very helpful. We're going to look at improvising on requests, or we're looking at issues on rationalization. So we're going to look at some more problems. In particular, I'm going to look at from how you do the gap analysis, relationship metrics, the application maturity index, what kind of baseline architecture we had to look at, what are the timeline and effort and the cost estimation and the benefits for having an approach, what I discussed in the previous one. So we're going to look at some of these issues in particular, and very importantly is like the visual diagnosis is how why it is important. And you're going to see that these are not very complex. More importantly, we're going to see that how we could use these concepts of visual diagnosis for solving problem. And unlike maybe might a lot of people think about that it's going to be a very time consuming and expensive technique, we're going to see that the visual diagnosis, which is the basis which is the basis for a medical treatment, similarly for the enterprise treatment, the timeline and the effort and the costs are going to be much lower than what people might think otherwise. So we're going to look at these three things in the part 1 and part 2 and the part 3, and hopefully this 5 hours gives you a fairly good idea about how one can start addressing the issue of enterprise disorder.